So Guru Maharaj asked me to make videos about my realizations. But part of why I am here watching his videos is because I got tired of realizations. So great, Maharaj wants me to do realizations, but I'm sick and tired of realizations. Great. But last night, a friend of mine, he's actually a Buddhist monk, he lives in California right now, he sent me a video of the Palace of the Tooth in Sri Lanka. And at this Palace of the Tooth, obviously it's a Buddhist monastery, and they have a relic of a tooth from the Buddha there. And basically, whoever controls this specific temple with the relic inside are king and queen of the country. Looking at the temple, everything is extremely ornate, and the design and colors and all the gold is just beautiful. And that's when the realization hit me that it wasn't realizations that I'm against, it was the focus on the realizations. Realizations are the way that Krishna has decided to dazzle us, because as humans, especially in this Kali Yuga, emphasis is put on intellect, brain, thinking, all of these things. So with this mindset of just sitting back and letting Krishna entertain me with these realizations, they become a lot more enjoyable and even contribute to the bliss. Hare Krishna everybody, my name is Kakati Das. I'm making this video today to tell you a little bit more about myself. So I'm 31 and I was raised in eastern Kentucky in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. I was adopted by my great aunt and uncle, and they raised me in a Christian church in Jackson, Kentucky. I basically spent my entire childhood at this church and the events associated with the church. We would travel all over the state, going to camps and conventions and events. Now, growing up, my parents had really great jobs, so I was never want for anything really. Probably the biggest problem in my life was my mother and her relationship with alcohol. Every time she lost somebody important in her life, she turned to alcohol. And we lived in a dry county, so it got so bad that she would even turn to vanilla extract because my dad was monitoring the miles on the car to see if she was driving far to get out of the county to buy alcohol. Eventually, she won that battle with alcohol and overcame her addiction, so I don't want to get too negative on that point. So when I was 12 years old, I moved to Berea, Kentucky, and I finished the rest of my 8th grade year there and went ahead and finished high school. Now, around the time I was 12 years old, I went to a church camp in eastern Kentucky, and I had the first spiritual awakening of my life. I was in dandavats on my face, praying to Jesus, and a spirit of love and bliss came over me. I just laid there and cried. It was half an hour of laying there. After half an hour of laying there, I went to bed and went to sleep. And this is the moment that, for Christians, they would say that they got saved. That was my first spiritual experience. Shortly after that, maybe 2 years, the highs from that start to decrease because it's not Krishna consciousness. It gave me a taste of that. So over time, that feeling decreased. Eventually, when I was 13 or 14 and after I had moved to Berea, so I went into the bathroom and I turned the corner and I looked in the mirror and I saw myself there. And for the first time, I had the feeling of mortality where I looked at myself and I told myself, "You're going to die. You're going to die. You're going to die." And then so I just kept staring at the mirror. And eventually I asked myself, why am I here? What is the point of being here if I'm just going to die? What is the point? In the larger timeline in all of existence, what is the point of my existence on this planet when everything is just going to collapse on itself? Everything is going to be destroyed, and it's like I didn't even exist. So after that point, I continued to go to church in my new town, and going through the swings of puberty and everything added on top of that mentality, and I was growing more and more unsettled and unresolved in what was actually true. I began to question more and more these teachings that I was being told about in church. So my faith fell and fell and fell. Eventually at 18 years old, after I graduated high school, I joined the U.S. Navy and went to boot camp in October of 2008. At this point I was still spiritual, but I had completely left behind the idea of there even being a God at this point. I wasn't atheist, I just didn't care. So after boot camp and training, I got a permanent duty station in Seattle. I was assigned to an aircraft carrier. After 2 or 3 years of being stationed in Seattle and living that experimental phase of my life, the same type of experimental phase a lot of the college-aged or young people go through, I reverted to my spirituality from before, and I remembered my mortality. I wanted to find the answers. I was ready to find truth.
You're going to die!
So this is when I found Buddhism. And Buddhism is really cool because it really appealed to my logical side. Once becoming suppressed and depressed by society, by Maya and the material world, Buddhism gave me pride in finding logical answers to mortality and the will to start taking responsibility for my actions. I learned how to meditate, and meditation is one of the greatest things that ever happened to me, both for my material mind and for my spiritual being. Anyone who has meditated before can tell you it's awesome. So I was on the ship in the middle of the Arabian Gulf in a dark closet where they keep the old wine and chains and anchors. And this is where I meditated. While in the Navy, I became very morally opposed to a lot of the things that I knew about and was also asked to do. I didn't like being a part of these wars that were only brought about to nook and crook their way to more money or to deeper control over society. So I got out. After a couple of months outside of the Navy, I felt like a change, and a deeper part of me still believed in God. So this is when I started experimenting with Islam. Now, Islam gave me a lot of answers that Christianity never gave. How can a human be an actual physical son of God in material Maya when God is not material? Islam said that Jesus was a prophet, so this is even closer to the actual truth of Jesus being a guru. I learned about more prophets, Muhammad, Abraham, Brahma, etc. I still had a form of meditation. I prayed 5 times a day, and I had a string of beads that I would count through while chanting a mantra.
A mantra?
In which the words were, La ilaha illallah. There is no God other than God. Semantic bullshit. But there it was. I still had my meditation. I learned discipline. That was the main thing here that I didn't have with Buddhism. And so after about a year of practicing Islam, I got the news that my mother was sick, so I moved back to Kentucky. I started school, I met my wife, and I got a job with Best Buy. After about a year of being back in Kentucky and married with a new job and school, getting housing allowance from the Navy, there were a few hiccups that I had found in the philosophy of Islam. For example, if God is all merciful, why does he damn someone to hell for eternity? And not only that, but I have felt a presence that was simply lacking. It was too hands-off, it was still a very material feeling because it was too focused on, I would later learn, an impersonal God or a force. God not being a person, God being a thing. This is the main problem with Islam, and this is the main problem with Christians that believe that Jesus isn't God and that God being Jesus' Father is just a force or object or thing. Or Christians or Muslims thinking that God is God and too high and mighty, and that is all that God is. God is God, and that is it. He doesn't have emotions, feelings, wants, like a normal person does. That's crap. So at the time, I watched a YouTuber named Koi Fresco, and he was Buddhist at the time, but was just making the transition to Hinduism. And I was like, oh, what is that? Gods? Persons? Gods other than Allah? That seems just rebellious enough for this fool to try. So I got acquainted with Hinduism. The first thing that I did, the first book I read was Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahamsa Yogananda. And I really got involved in the Self-Realization Fellowship. I really enjoyed their services most of all, before anything else. But they still had a material conception of God, a mechanical conception of how he works, when God is above any type of mechanical conception that you can make up about him. And God is only a function of the Supreme Person. That is not who he is. He only is that because people demand it of him. How's that for a realization? But the services were really great. They did develop some level of bhakti, and there was congregational singing, but the practice largely hinged around meditation rather than emotional relationships between fellow devotees and the devotees with the Supreme Being. So I eventually left that, and Koi Fresco ended up posting an interview with a monk from ISKCON. That monk from ISKCON also has a YouTube channel called West Coast Monk. So after coming in contact with this interview, everything else was smooth sailing after that, man. I picked up the 1972 version of Bhagavad Gita as it is, and I read it within 2 months. Front to back, up and down. I loved every single piece of it. It's the best book that I've ever read, period. After reading the Bhagavad Gita, I met a friend on Facebook named Kamadeva. And Kamadeva is probably the most intelligent person I've ever met in my life. He is extremely intelligent, to the point where it made my false ego struggle against the confines of trying to prove him wrong in any and every way. But we were also best friends. We could pretty much understand each other without even saying anything. If you look around YouTube, you can probably find videos of us talking together, but I don't want to make any drama out of this. What's past is past. But basically, at one point, I came across Srila Gaur Haridas, and this was, probably 4 or 5 months after me and Kamadeva had been together. Srila Gaur Haridas was focusing on love, on bhakti, on the relationships, on the emotional aspect, all of these things that I had come to love, while Kamadeva was mostly focused on rules, regulations, jnana yoga, karma yoga, and a little bit of bhakti yoga. But he eventually talked me out of Guru Dev's association, so I left him after about 3 days. I even called my own guru a hypocrite, and I blocked him. Because I'm a fool! So the rest of the time spent with Kamadeva through the remainder of last year and early into this year was spent mainly strengthening our organization, which was called the International Harinam Sankirtan Society, or movement. We had a lot of realizations. We were able to analyze alphabet, numbers, colors, even songs, pop culture, video games. We were able to analyze everything and see the message that Krishna was presenting to us through them. So specifically, you might know what we're talking about if you've read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the part where Lord Chaitanya got kicked out of the school building for trying to teach the alphabet based on Krishna to his students. They chased him away and called him a Sahajiya. Sahajiya, Sahajiya, Sahajiya! Sahajiya. So then, eventually, I realized that it was time for me to get off the bus. I was tired of doing karma yoga. I was tired of doing jnana yoga. I was tired of focusing on realizations and not playing backseat to Krishna, basically. False ego. Completely the false ego. So on Mahashivaratri of this year, I asked Nitai to please grant me Krishna Prema. I asked Shiva to please grant me Krishna Prema. What did he do? He brought me back to Maharaj. Haribol! And then, this happened to me. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. I can't stop. Inside of my eyelid is like dry and I can feel it. But my whole face is wet. Look at this. Ooh, this is something else. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama. And everything has been gravy ever since.
You're going to die.